Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show. Thank you ever so much, as always, for joining us and tuning in and making us a part of your morning routines. Hope you've had a good start to your weeks. Thank you, as always, for doing so. Please do drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. Let's jump into the chat box and say good morning to some people. First of all, we've got Jose, Amira, Black Shine, Martin, Dave, Lucas. We've got Johnny, Stevie, NSW, Paul, Martin, Olu, Kaiser, Peter, David, Temi, Vivian. We've got Trevor and Mike and Answer and Spike's dad, Gary, Carl, plenty more of you guys as well. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Very much appreciate your time. Am I sick, says Drew? I sound woozy. Oh, no, sorry. I'm hoping the audio sounds fine. I'm okay. I hope so anyway. Who knows? By the end of this show, I may be different. To wait and see. Let's crack on with today's stories. We first of all kick off with the obvious first choice, and that is, of course, Bukayo Saka signing a brand new contract with Arsenal, which is fantastic news. You cannot actually understate how big of a deal this is. Bukayo Saka signing a new contract with Arsenal is probably the most important signing that we've made in terms of a contract renewal. I'm trying to think a really, really long time ago in terms of contract renewals. But Arsenal have, unfortunately, lost so much of their talent. When they were, losing money, well, not losing money, but restricted with spending, and we were losing Fabregas and Nasri and Van Persie. But what I don't really think can be understated is, obviously, no matter what the amount of money is, and we can have a talk about that if people are really genuinely concerned about that, which apparently some are. But besides that, as the only real sort of talking point on this, there is no drawback to signing up Bukayo Saka for the future, because he is just so important for this club's future and will only be important for this club's future. I can't see it going any other way, which I know is tempting fate somewhat, but amazing news that Saka indeed has signed a brand new deal. We just got to hope now that the likes of William Saliba, will be next. Martin Odegaard is said to be in talks. Ben White is also expected to have potential talks over a brand new deal as well. And there's someone else as well who skipped my mind now. Reiss Nelson, of course, also in potential talks over a new deal. So lots to be positive about, lots to be excited about in the world of Arsenal and signing new deals. But Bukayo Saka extending his contract with Arsenal is a huge bit of positivity and big positive news for Arsenal. However, there is still hope that Reiss Nelson will join Saka in signing a new deal at the club. The young Hale End graduate, of course, sees his contract run out at the end of this season. Fabrizio Romano details that third contract offer that was initially reported by James Benge is said to be for around 4 years. And that is it's a long contract for a player that we were offering 1 year deals to. But if the club are that serious about trying to keep hold of the player, that's obviously a massive indication to us that they are going for this long-term side of things, that Mikel Arteta really wants to keep Nelson at the club. But then there was a report from Dharmesh Sheth of Sky to suggest that only a 1 year deal had been offered. Now, there have been 2 prior contract offers before the third one has gone in. So it may be that Dharmesh has got the previous contract length that Arsenal offered, and that this contract is specifically for the 4 years that Fabrizio is reporting. So let's see what happens. But at the moment, there's no breakthrough. There's no difference in the situation. So we're going to have to wait and see. Thomas Partey as well could leave the club, it seems, this summer. The player is, of course, experiencing a little bit of a down end to the season, to be honest. Is experiencing a little bit of a dip in form. And Italian clubs are said to be showing their interest, according to John Cross of the Mirror. Whether or not Partey will indeed leave the club between now and the end of the summer transfer window remains to be seen. But with Granit Xhaka moving on, I'd be surprised if he indeed did leave. But you can never rule out anything in the sport at all. Anything can happen. Differences and changes happen in football. But hopefully Arsenal are able to obviously reinforce the squad over replacing players, because otherwise you're not really strengthening things to me whatsoever. So yeah, we need to make sure we reinforce rather than replace. That's been the motto for me for the summer, and that will hopefully continue with keeping Partey and keeping key players in the squad, and then adding to them with key additions. Now, it's said that City want to offer Gundogan a 1-year deal, whereas Barcelona apparently are willing to offer a 2-year deal. It's still unclear what Arsenal would offer Ilkay Gundogan, according to James Ollie. That said, there have been other reports to suggest that City now would be willing to match the offer from Barcelona and potentially Arsenal to keep Gundogan not only at the club, but away from those rivals in both Europe and in England as well. It seems to be that a deal to try and sign Gundogan is going to be very difficult for Arsenal, and Man City still remains the likely destination that he will remain at for the foreseeable future. But we'll have to wait and see, and we'll keep you updated on this story. Now, moving into potential transfers, and Galatasaray right back Sacha Boey, the French young right back, is said to command a fee of upwards of 25 million euros if Arsenal indeed do want to grab hold of the fullback. Arsenal have been interested in the player for some time, but according to Fabrizio Romano, it's going to cost Arsenal upwards of 25 million if they're going to get their hands on the player, which is a lot of money for a player that I don't know too much about. Doesn't say that he's not worth that amount of money. But Arsenal have other targets in that area as well, and I think I'd still rather see Arsenal move for a player like Mohamed Simakan, to be honest, over someone like Boey, who is more of an offensive-minded fullback, and then Simakan brings in that versatility. Meanwhile, and Caicedo's future remains up in the air, still linked with Arsenal quite heavily, but Zerbi has claimed that the Man City game this week could be his last home game, as well as that for Alexis McAllister, if indeed Arsenal are very serious about trying to sign Caicedo again during this transfer window. We'll have to wait and see. But what I do recognise, obviously, with this is we've got a player here in Caicedo who is a fantastic talent. You can't disagree with the fact he's a fantastic talent. But the Zerbi said it could be his last game. Now, don't let your security be the last thing on your minds. You should absolutely be making sure that you are protected and safe and secure online, and you can do that with NordVPN. Just go to nordvpn.com/Gooner to get yourself a significant discount off of a subscription. It keeps you safe and secure online, enables you to change your geolocation as well, which is obviously a fantastic perk of the service as well. So go to nordvpn.com/Gooner, change your geolocation on your tablet, your laptop, or your phone, and of course, get yourself the safety and security that you need. Not only that, but you can still get involved in the latest Martin Ødegaard Football Prizes competition, courtesy of Football Prizes. There is a instant win prize as well to win a signed Thomas Partey shirt, which you can indeed do. So make sure you get involved with the latest competition, and I wish you the best of luck. Right, let's go into part 2 and your questions right after this. Okay, then. Part 2. That's what we need to get to. We need to get to part 2 and find out some of the things that you guys want to ask in the chat box. Let's waste no time. Okay. Derek says, should I ask a question? Well, there's your question gone for the day, Derek. Yes, would be the answer. It's a shame. Maybe you could have asked one before. Peter says, Tom, thoughts on reports linking us to James Maddison for less than 50 million? Buy or move on? I think Maddison will probably be on a list of players that are like below Mason Mount on the club's agenda. Mason Mount obviously seems to be Arsenal's clear target this season. So we'll have to wait and see whether or not Mason Mount is gettable for Arsenal this summer. And if they can't get him, maybe they'll move for someone like James Maddison instead. That says, Tom, have you seen the Arteta interview on Sky yet? No, I haven't. I will definitely check it out. But thank you, Matt, for raising that to my attention. Abe says, could you see Smith Rowe's new role next season as being an inverted left-back like Zinchenko, or more of an 8? I don't think it's going to be an inverted fullback position for Smith Rowe. I think that there's more chance he becomes, if he indeed does stay here at the club next season, there's more chance, I think, that we'll see Smith Rowe playing as kind of Martin Ødegaard's competitor. He was coming on and being used in that position when coming off the bench. So let's see. But I imagine that is probably what we'll see from, from Smith Rowe if indeed he does stay. Dave says, is Mount good enough? Yes, absolutely. I'm going I'm going to do an article, I think, today on Mason Mount and the argument around Mason Mount, and doing a more of a deep dive statistically into Mount and why actually is he the right profile for Arsenal to add to their squad for next season. I think that he is. I think he's underrated amongst Arsenal supporters. And there's kind of a stigma around Chelsea players, and there's starting to become a stigma around Manchester City players, which is kind of crazy because we always used to say back in the day, if Man City would have these players, should we sign them? And now we're starting to turn our nose up at Man City players that they want, like Gundogan still. So, yes, is Mount good enough? I personally think so, but I'm going to do some more digging and get some evidence for you so you can read through that. Speaking of articles, I did an article this morning on football.london that is out for you guys to read. It's on my page. You can find that in the link tree down in the description. But the article is all about, you've seen a few people online, actually quite a few people. There's a lot of Arsenal critics around at the moment. And one of the biggest and most common themes that we're seeing amongst Arsenal's critics is suggestions that references to the injuries that Arsenal suffered at the end of both this season and last season were quote unquote just excuses for a bad end of the campaign, when, those more grounded and objective amongst us all know, of course, that those injuries have had a significantly detrimental impact on this team. So I discussed that at length. I also discussed the whole Arteta's had quote 500 million, as some suggest. Not true. We've not invested anywhere close to 400 million in the squad. We've actually invested just under 400. 500 million is the claim. We've invested just under 400 million in the squad, which has gone to basically replace 9 first-team starters. And of course, some have now moved to the bench as well. Not all of those signings have been impactful or successes, but the investment that we have made has obviously been significant. And at the same time, it shows you how much investment is needed to then change a squad so that it can compete with Man City. And so the expectations and the rhetoric of, well, he's had £500 million, not true. Why hasn't he won a trophy yet? Well, A, he has won a trophy. B, all that money that we've invested has been enough to change our starting 11 into a side that can compete with Man City if all are fit. And unfortunately, that just wasn't the case this season because they weren't. So I would encourage you to go and give that piece a read on FL if you could, and then let me know what you think. Luke says, there's over 600 of you watching and there's only 95 likes. Come on, guys, let's make sure we get up the like button. It really does help us out here. We put this show on every single morning, 8 a.m. Get up bright and early to put the show together. If you could drop a like, it takes you a second and it really does help us out. Benji says, Tom, do you think that we have what it takes mentality-wise to go far in the Champions League or the other cups? We seem to have lost the defensive nous and ability to kill off games. Looking at the West Ham game, for instance, mentality is often looked at a lot. I think mentality has been referenced to a hell of a lot as well. I think that when it comes to mentality, Arsenal's mental state and Arsenal's maturity and experience is always going to come into a bit of a question when you've got one of the youngest squads in the league. But I think we're adding players to that. I think Arsenal have done some great things this season. I think they've shown great mentality to come back in games. They've gone 1-0 down. I think about the West Ham home game, this season where we went 1-0 down and we came back. Think about when Saliba scored that own goal, the reaction of that. Other games like Fulham where we've conceded and then, of course, we've scored again. You think about games like Manchester United at home where we conceded from Rashford and then won that game. I think we've shown great mentality in games. But, of course, we can add further depth. I think, as I've said before, and I talked about this in the article, the issues have been obviously the fact that we've lacked the same level of depth as Man City. And then when we've had injuries to key players, that has been massively costly to the side as well. Gary says, Tom, I received abuse yesterday because I was trying to see the bigger picture and see the positives from our season. I was told fans like me are the reason we fail as a club. Why do fans blame their own? First of all, Gary, unfortunately, you're always going to find people that aren't very nice, particularly online, and can't really hold a debate or a discussion about Arsenal without getting abusive or reverting to calling people names like they would in a preschool playground. However, what at the same time that you have to expect is if you're putting across a reasoned argument, some people just can't see that, and sometimes pride comes a little bit more ahead of looking at the bigger picture and looking at genuine reasons as to why Arsenal's title challenge fell away. But don't worry, Gary, just know that the bigger picture, as you've put it, to look at the positives from this season is certainly the right side of the line to be on regarding the campaign. And what often happens, Gary, I've asked so many people, people that leave critical comments about Arsenal's season, people that are Arteta out still somehow, which I think borders on Well, it's not bordering on ludicrous. It just is ludicrous at this stage. You know, when you ask these people, would they like to come on the show, have a talk about this? Can they put their, you know, their thoughts and their abuse sometimes where their mouth is rather than where their keyboard is? It doesn't tend to happen. So, Gary, I'm not even sure these people are real at the end of the day. It could be one guy with loads of different accounts. Who knows? Who knows? Next says, hey, Tom, how would you rate our defence this season? Also, do you believe it led to our collapse at the business end of the campaign? If you're asking me how I rate the back five of Ramsdale, White, Saliba, Gabriel and Zinchenko, I give it a strong 9 out of 10. If you're asking me what I think about the defence, if it's Ramsdale, White, Holding, Gabriel and Tierney, you know, that's cost us somewhat more this season. And unfortunately, the loss of Saliba has been a huge blow to us. You can't concede 42 goals in a campaign and expect to win the league. You know, Man City have got treble the number of goals than they have conceded goals. Arsenal haven't even got double the number of goals than they have conceded this season. That has to change if Arsenal want to be able to go and compete with Man City. But what I love in some ways about the irony of this whole season is we sit here in second place. We sit here going further than we ever expected this campaign, and we still talk about so much of the criticisms of what we need to do. And that's the right mentality. You know, absolutely we can talk about the successes as we were just talking about there with Gary and the positives of this season. But what this season has done, I think, is clearly outlined to us, and we all should know this by now. We all know what the difference between us and Man City is. One is the fact that they have got the best manager on the planet, you know, and no matter who is in charge of Arsenal, if it's not Pep Guardiola, you're always going to be one step back from that coach at least. And then, of course, you've got to look at the squads, and you look at the squad that they've built over the last decade. You know, their owners, their executives, their recruiters, their manager, you know, have the cheek sometimes to say that they've not spent as much as other teams, completely wanting to divert and deflect away from the fact of the foundation of the investment that was there from the start. So I think that ultimately the defence, yes, Nexus has led to the collapse, and the injuries to that defence has led to the collapse. But there's also other reasons. And when you're going up against a Man City side that have won 12 on the bounce, you have to be perfect. And then when you're without key players from your starting 11, you don't have the depth options to compete because, you know, we're still not there. We've still not invested enough, believe it or not, even though we've spent close to 400 million on players. We need to change that. But yeah, when you're ever in a discussion online and people start saying, oh, well, Arteta's had $500 million, which is, you know, not true for starters in terms of how much we've invested in player transfers. And when you start to look at the injuries that we've had this season, you know, they are genuine reasons. So don't let people tell you otherwise or talk down to you on that, because they are actually reasons why what happened. Gooner Jake says, Tom, you being of sound mind, how much can we get realistically for Tavares, Holding, Pepe, Cedric, Aziz and Patino? Well, Patino, we should be looking for, you know, upwards, I think, of £10 million. Miguel, and with a buyback clause in that, which would lower the price. Aziz, I think you're going to struggle to get much for at all. Cedric, I think you're going to struggle to get much for at all. Pepe, I think you're going to struggle to get much for at all. Holding, I think you should be getting as close to 10 million as you can. And Tavares, I think you should be looking to get slightly upwards of 10 million as well. So all in total, probably around 40 million for the group of 6 players. That's probably what you're going to be looking at. And I remember the days when you said that Tavares on his own would be worth £40 million. But that's probably, in this market, based upon the context of every single player, what you're going to end up getting. Did I whistle when I drink? What? It's just the sound it makes with a straw. That's what happens. I'm sorry. Let's go to Mitch says, shouldn't we be finding a new right back? Ben White is a natural centre back, but Saliba and Tomiyasu have got Ben White. I've got injured. Ben White had to move to the space and Leicester's players in the midfield. That's our problem. Yeah, well, I mean, Ben White is, I think, and shown to be not just a natural centre back, Mitch. I think he's shown to be a natural right back as well. But I'm not disagreeing with you. I think we do need to go for a right back option this summer. So yes, absolutely. There you go. Derek says, I can't even get 6 things at the market for 40 million quid. Well, I'm sorry, but you're shopping in the wrong places, I'm afraid then, Derek. Get out of Waitrose, yeah? Just get out. I mean, even Waitrose seems to be significantly cheaper than wherever you're going. Phil White says, Tom, can you see Edu and KSE overspending on an important target to make sure they don't go to one of their competitors like a Reiss or Caicedo? Otherwise, I fear they may just pivot like they do a lot of the time. The irony is, Phil White, is Arsenal did that in January. You know, Arsenal bid close to 100 million for Mudryk, which we can all agree is well over the price tag valuation of that player. Caicedo as well. We bid £70 million for Caicedo, which at the time, most people would agree was way over what the player was worth. And Arsenal are willing to overpay. But when it comes down to overpaying compared to their rivals who have a lot more money than them, and like Chelsea, Manchester City, potentially Newcastle as well in the summer, you can't just judge the club and say, well, yeah, you're not good enough because you're not doubling the market value of a player. Like, say, if we had to go to 120 million for Declan Rice. Declan Rice isn't worth 120 million pounds. And we're close to bidding, reportedly, for 92 million pounds for Declan Rice, which is a hell of a lot of money. So it's a difficult one. At the end of the day, at some point you have to say no. You have to say that you can't keep going and going and going until you get the player, because it gets ridiculous. Some clubs will, but it's not always the right thing to do that. Tuan says, how much could convince Arsenal to let Partey go? I think upwards of probably close to 40, between 30 and 40 million pounds. You would think would be able to what would get Partey, but he is now nearing 30, if not already. That could affect things, but I think upwards of 30 to 40 million pounds is surely what you would get for Thomas Partey at this stage, with the length of contract he has left as well. Matt G says, Tom, you need to raise your standards, mate. Next season, I expect the league, the Champions League, the FA Cup, the Audi Cup, going unbeaten and getting 50 million for Tavares. Standards. #light work. Oh, mate, I know my standards are just so low. My standards are just on the floor with this football club. Like, honestly, if we get top 16, I'm going to be happy. If we get top 16, that's fair, is it not, Matt? Is that not fair? Honestly, these people. It is one of my favourite lines, the whole of we need to raise our standards, as if the fans have had any bearing on what's happened. Yes, because what is it? Because Sophie23 from Essex says that Arsenal, she's happy with Arsenal being in the top 4 this season. That meant that Arsenal ultimately haven't had good enough standards to win the league. So what? Do you know why? I was watching Dave. If you're in the UK, we have a channel called Dave, and they usually play really old episodes of Top Gear. And I remember the episode where they invited loads of celebrities in quotation marks round to do the track. The amount of weird celebrity names. That's why that was stuck in my head then. But there you go. I really don't get the whole. Mindset of we need to raise our standards, and it's the fans' low standards that mean we are where we are. Behave yourself. Behave yourself. Genuinely, what do you think is going to change? Yeah, if you've got all the fans in the stadium against Wolves, what we should do, right? This is the sensible thing, because we need to raise our standards. Remember, at Wolves, if you go into the game because we finished second, if everyone boos and says, no, not good enough, guys, not good enough this season, we're going to boo you. We're going to boo you. And next season, that's going to encourage them to finish first. That's what's going to happen. So when you put it like that, and it makes you realize how silly of a point of view that really is, the whole we need to raise our standards. Goodness gracious me. Mayor says, I do want us to compete in all competitions and get serious about the cups too. And don't be like a blessing in disguise if we get knocked out. Look, Mayor, I'm with you. I'd love us to compete in all of these competitions. But what I think is key to remember is, if you want to compete for the title and you want to go up against Manchester City and beat them, the most likely outcome is that your other competitions are going to suffer. And the evidence of that has happened already. In the last 6 seasons, including this one, and Man City have won 5 of them, there have been one team and one team only that beat them. And that was Liverpool. And during that season that Liverpool won the league, they were knocked out of the FA Cup in the 5th round. They were knocked out in the Carabao Cup in the quarterfinals. And they were knocked out of the Champions League in the last 16. And they went on to beat Man City to the title, in which I think they managed to get something like just over 80 points. And they still had to get quite fortunate with City's form not being particularly great that season. So that's what you're going up against if you want to do well in the cup competitions and compete for the title and win the league, yeah? That's what you're going up against. So you can win the league, but to expect the cup competitions not to suffer as a result, I think, is maybe taking it one step too far. Sorry, it was 90. It was over 90 points. Omar's right. It was 99 points. I was thinking of the season prior. But what I was looking at regarding the Champions League and Arsenal's entrance into the competitions that season is that Arsenal hopefully can push as far as they possibly can in the Champions League next year, because I think you've seen teams like Villarreal, teams like RB Leipzig, teams like Milan, get to the quarterfinals, the semi-finals, and do really, really well in that competition. And the amount of money that you get, in a competition next season, in like the Champions League, will be significantly much more than we get from playing in the Europa League. Matt says the minimum is winning a trophy next season. And this is a comment that I do have an issue with, because I've asked people numerous times if you could swap this season for 5th place in the FA Cup. The majority of people say, no, I wouldn't swap this season for 5th place in the FA Cup. And so therefore, how can the trophy for next season be a minimum? Sorry, that's not how it works. It's just not how it works. For me, I'm always looking at Arsenal moving forwards. Now, the closer that you get to the top of the table, the margins to progress obviously get smaller and smaller and smaller. I'd love Arsenal to win a trophy. I think that we've got the capacity to win a trophy next season if indeed we do, invest, if indeed we do reinforce, and we add that key or a number of key players to the squad. But to say the minimum expectation is winning a trophy next season, I think puts Arsenal and particularly Arteta, into a situation whereby if he doesn't win a trophy, right, and we find ourselves competing with Man City again, and we have a much better title challenge than we did this year, and say we get even closer and we push City all the way to the final game of the season, we push them closer than we did this season, but we still miss out. Because the minimum expectation was a trophy, do you then sack Arteta? Because I don't see how that makes any sense. So the idea that the minimum expectation is a trophy, it doesn't work. A, because of the question regarding, most of us wouldn't have swapped this season for 5th place in the FA Cup. And B, because you can show progression and move towards your goals and still mean you should keep the manager. In my mind, if you're saying the minimum expectation is a trophy, and if we don't win a trophy next season, Arteta should be sacked, I think that's madness. I think it's naive and ignorant of what ultimately Arsenal are doing as a club and the way that we're progressing. I think it takes completely for granted what is going on at the football club. And I think it completely underestimates what you're then going to look to do the following season with whoever you're putting in charge of the football club. I think someone tagged me in a tweet this morning. Let me see if I can find this tweet. Where is it? Someone tagged me. Here we go. The tweet was, imagine having Allegri and Pochettino available and chasing Arteta and Howe. Arsenal are bringing this upon themselves. Oh, my goodness me. The expectation is that if we where we finish this season is we should have got rid of Arteta and brought in Pochettino. That's the level of some people's thinking around this football club, and it does not fail to shock me. And yet, whenever I try and speak to any of these people and say, "Come and have a chat, let's have a debate, let's talk about this, talk to me about why you think Arteta should go," it's no. I had a great conversation on social media with someone yesterday, which was like, they sent me some stuff about why Arteta should be sacked, and I said, "Oh, I'd love to have you on the show to come and talk about this." And they said, "I don't have the equipment." And I said, "Well, what are you messaging me on right now?" No, I was like, "A phone." And I was like, well, you can use your phone. And then it was, oh, I don't want to. I was like, well, why did you say it was about the equipment? Don't lie. You just can't. You just don't want to come on. You just don't want to do the conversation. It is what it is. I get it. So there you go. Neil says, is Arteta unsackable? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If Arsenal regress, if Arsenal are going backwards, you can't legislate for that. You cannot allow Arsenal to go backwards. If the project begins to fail, then you have to move on. You have to make changes. You can't accept regression. It's why I was always keen on getting rid of Arsene Wenger sooner. It was why I was keen on recognising that we had to move on Unai Emery when we did. And the club moved at a good pace and at a good speed, I think, to get Emery gone. Maybe slightly too slow, but we made the right decision in moving Emery on. The job was way too big for Emery, like the PSG was too big for Emery. If you're at PSG and you're losing the title, there are question marks going on. As there was for Pochettino at the same time, which is why I still laugh about suggestions Arsenal should have got Pochettino in. But there you go. Let's go. James says, I'll talk to you, Tom. Thanks, mate. James, I know you're on social media and Twitter. Drop me a DM a little bit later on this morning, please, and we'll make sure we sort out a time to have this discussion. Neil says, expectations is always for us to compete. That's the bare minimum. No team is guaranteed to start any season to win. Absolutely. And look, if Arsenal go into next season, we're not competitive, then we have not reached what I would believe to be the expectation at all. The expectation for Arsenal can never be to win the Premier League. While Man City exists in their current form, unless you are Manchester City, the expectation to win, I just think, is a bit off in terms of that trophy, because Man City go into every single tournament they enter as favourites, right? So if Man City lose the Champions League final, or they lose the FA Cup final, if Man City win 2 trophies of a possible 4 this season, there's a good argument that they've still underachieved. And that's the level of what we're going up against during this season, next season, however, into the future. While this iteration of Manchester City exists, they go into every single tournament as favourites. If I turned to anyone and said, who is most likely to win the League Cup next season? The answer is Man City. Who is most likely to win the Champions League next season? The answer is Man City. Who is most likely to win the FA Cup, the Premier League? The answer is Manchester City. And so if the minimum expectation for a coach of any other team that isn't Man City is they have to win one of those trophies, that's the minimum expectation, then you're already setting them up for a fail. You're asking them that the minimum expectation is to overachieve. That's what you're expecting. If the expectation is to win a trophy as an absolute minimum, then the minimum expectation is to overachieve instead of just achieve. And that's why, for me, the minimum expectation for Arsenal Football Club is to show progression. It's to show us getting closer to winning that title. It's getting us reeling Manchester City in and closing the gap until the point where we can compete with them. But in 3 years, with less than £400 million spent on your starting 11 and squad, to expect to compete with Man City already, which is not what people expected this season, and yet it's what we did, just doesn't align. Just doesn't make sense. Does not make sense. And I am yet to hear from one person face-to-face on a stream in one of our phone-ins explain to me why that minimum expectation to win a trophy is there. It just is. And Matt, I'm not saying you're Arteta out at all. And I absolutely understand that there are people that love Mikel Arteta and are going into next season saying the minimum expectation is to win a trophy that I don't agree with. I don't think you're Arteta out at all. I just think that the context around what you're expecting does not align with the reality of the situation. Charlie says the minimum expectations now is to be a title challenger, and I agree, because if Arsenal aren't title challengers next season, then they are not progressing. They are not going forwards. They are not going in the direction that we need to go in. We need next season to have a better title challenge than we had this season. Is it going to be tougher? Sure, it might be tougher because Chelsea will be better and Newcastle will be better and United will be better. But we said that last season. Last season we said United are going to be better, Chelsea are going to be better. Look what happened to Liverpool. Look what happened to Chelsea. There's no guarantees in football. Teams are not always going to be better. But the expectation for your club is that they will be. Forget anyone else bar City, because that they are the example. They are the target. And so at the end of the day, you have to go into that season going, the expectation is to be better, is to progress, is to get closer to our goals. And that may include a trophy, which would be great. But whilst this current form of Man City exists, I'm sorry, but the expectation, just for me, realistically cannot be win a trophy. Arsenal as a football club should be winning things, right? That's a different discussion entirely. Based on the historical merit of the club, Arsenal Football Club should be trying to aim to win trophies. And look, the aim is, if you want to talk about the difference between expectation and what aims are, they're two different things. The aim is to go and win the title. The aim is to win a trophy. But the expectation will not necessarily be the same of what the aim is. And hopefully that gives you the most clarity about this debate. So there you go. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. I will be attempting to do that phone-in show probably Thursday. I don't think it's going to be today. I don't think I'm going to be able to squeeze it in time-wise. But yes, that hopefully will come up soon. Hopefully we can get more people. I do want to do a funny show at the end of the season as well, obviously, after the season's finished. We'll also be doing plenty of transfer shows relating specifically to kind of like who we would sell, what we'll do player ratings for the end of the season as well. We'll do those tier lists, and we know we love those tier list videos. So that's what we want to discuss. That's what we want to do. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. Lassican, here we go. This is one of my favorite comments. How much are they paying? Who is they? And why aren't they paying me more is what I want to know. I'd love that. Lassican, you are exactly one of these people that I'm talking about. Please get in touch. Please come and tell me why I'm wrong. I'd love to hear from you. I don't expect to, but I'd love to hear from you. Thank you, everybody that's tuned in and listens. Really appreciate your time as always. Drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and as always, up the Arsenal, you beautiful people.